Welcome to Character in Action with Matthew J. Norcross, the official podcast of the 7 Degrees of Change Foundation. Come journey with us on the real-life stories of character in action. And now here's your host, Matthew J. Norcross.
Welcome to Character in Action from the 7 Degrees of Change Foundation. I'm Matthew J. Norcross here in the studio with Carmen Ramirez, filling in for Robby Dilmore. Hey, Carmen.
Hey, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Now, this week, we're talking with former Congressman Mark Walker, a native of Greensboro, North Carolina, who is currently running for governor. During his time in Congress, he served in North Carolina's 6th District from 2015 to 2021. He's also a former pastor. Mark joins us now over the phone. Mark, thanks for being on Character in Action.
Matthew, it's good to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Now, you're here because you're a living example of character in action. Now, before we get started, can you please tell our listeners more about yourself?
Happy to do so. I grew up in the panhandle of Florida, moved to Winston-Salem, North Carolina 32 years ago, and worked in business for a few years, and then did something that I thought I would never do, swore I would never do. It would be to follow my father's footsteps as a pastor. Did that for 16 years, and then decided to run for the United States Congress in 2014. We were blessed to be elected and serve 3 terms or 6 years there in the U.S. House. And as you've stated now we're looking to see if moving forward on how we best can serve the people here in North Carolina.
Nice. So how do you define character? Well,
I think there's several different ways to define character. One of the more practical ways that I've always tried to remember, and I was being told this as a teenager, is character is what you do when no one is looking. And I've thought about that sometimes, because a lot of times when the spotlight's on you, people are going to behave, or when the TV cameras is on you, that they're going to behave. But what you do and how you carry yourself when no one is watching, or when you're by yourself, do you pick up that little piece of trash, or do you say a kind word to somebody that no one can give back to you? And I think that's kind of the essence, is how you lead your life. Do you lead something with substance, or we live in a time period where there's so many histrionics or social media, and people want to pretend to be this or that. But I think character at its very base is the ability to do the right thing no matter what kind of outside pressure you may have.
Yeah, very nice. Doing something when no one's looking. I've seen that. I've actually heard that from my guests many times, and it rings true to me. What are your thoughts, Carmen?
Oh, yes. The best way to tell somebody's character is when you're not looking. What will they do when nobody's watching?
Right. So, please tell us the story of witnessing either in person or in history. Someone that was a true phoenix, someone that was a role model, leading by example and making the world a better place.
Well, there's lots of famous historical stories. One that I think of in my lifetime, and it's kind of a confession on my part, because it was really convicting to me to kind of change my approach. I remember coaching a boys basketball team, and I had an assistant coach, and we ended up doing pretty well. And a couple years later, we had kind of lost contact, and we reconnected, and we were having a conversation over lunch one day, and he was very honest with me, and he said, "Mark," he said, "I felt like when we were working together that you looked past me." And I'm saying, "Well, Tom, what do you mean?" He kind of explained it a little bit, and as I began to think about that, I had to admit that he was right, because sometimes we're looking for the next person in the room, or we're looking for someone more famous, or of a higher stature. And it really changed my course into thinking about, to me, I consider him someone that a hero, because he takes the time for every individual that crosses his path, not to try to rush through or go to the next meeting, go to the next person, but to really invest in that individual's life. That's more of a practical example. Historically, I'm thinking of the rotunda in the Capitol. There are there are 8 paintings in the Capitol there in the United States, 4 of our early settlers and then 4 of our founding fathers. The last picture is my favorite. It's one of George Washington. The date the painter depicts is December 23rd, 1783. George Washington has been the commander-in-chief for 8 years, but that year, 1783, he has promised his wife, Martha Washington, that he would be home over to Mount Vernon, about 15, 20 miles away from D.C. there, that he would be home for Christmas. So in this painting, there are members of the Continental Congress seated, and George Washington is standing with a piece of paper in his hand. And in that paper is his resignation that even though that they were willing to give him more power, more authority, he showed the character, he showed the probably one of the boldest Phoenix moves of all time to walk away from power, because Matthew, he knew that if this country was going to do the very best, it would have to come from the people and not dictators or monarchs. And that was a pivotal moment in our country, which I think was a huge Phoenix moment.
Yeah, George Washington was definitely a person of character, wasn't he, Carmen?
Yeah, he really was. It really takes some sort of character to come down from power like that.
Yeah, it does. So please share a moment that stands out in your mind, something big or even the slightest gesture that was a transformative Phoenix moment, one where you knew it had a significant impact on an individual's life or on a group of people.
Well, that's you always want to live your life in a way that really shows true meaning, that you're investing in someone. And I've had a chance as a pastor to do some of those things there that you would hope would be sacrificially. It's a little uncomfortable talking about yourself and in that kind of manner as far as some of the work you've done, but being asked the question, I remember a young man, young married adult man, that had been struggling with some different addictions there at the time, and I remember befriending him, and it was interesting that as I was pouring into him and trying to walk through some difficult moments in his life, I stopped long enough to be able to learn and listen, maybe for the first time in a different way. And here's what I mean by that, Matthew. Instead of me being so focused on just giving him more rules and regulations, just to listen to him and to hear him out in some of the things that he was working through, I end up walking away feeling like that I was getting as much as I was giving in that moment. And I think that's one of the approaches that I've learned, is that in every meeting that I have, to have a place where there's a redemptive thread. And what I mean by that is that always have a place for people to be able to do better and offer redemption and grace, whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's quite an amazing story. Let's move on with the trait of respect. Now, this is a crucial trait in business and in life. And my first question is, how do you think we can rekindle the trait and lost art of respect today?
Matthew, that is such a great question. What I have learned is that in finding the respect that we have, whether it's for authority, whether it's each other, the better success rate you have in doing so is when it's taught at an early age. It's very difficult. Let's use an analogy of an athlete. If you wait till you are in your 20s to think you're going to be a baseball pitcher or football quarterback, it's much more difficult to learn the craft as if you would do so growing up, learning the hand-eye coordination. Or let's take something from a scholar. If you want to be a good reader, all these habits and all these disciplines, the more you learn them at an early age, the better success that you will have in life. It's no different than learning respect. When parents teach their children, through discipline sometimes, to properly respect each other, to properly respect the rule of law, even to properly respect themselves, there's a much better chance. And that's where I feel like sometimes even our education system has failed us in not teaching or providing examples of what that respect looks like even in the classroom. It's one of the great jobs of Phoenix and the charter academies that have done in bringing in some structure, bringing in some respect. So to answer the heart of your question there, I think it's very important. If you want to grow the respect in this country, in our society, it's very important to make sure that investment is made at an early age.
Yeah, that's what that's what a lot of people need to do. They need to teach people respect and character at an early age. Don't you think, Carmen?
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, they always say you gotta give respect to earn respect, but respect should just be given to anybody.
Yeah, you got to earn respect in order to receive it.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Very good point.
Yep. So let's move on to the trait of responsibility. Now, this being a congressman representing North Carolina, that is a big responsibility. Now, how do you manage your responsibilities in that position?
Well, I think this is such a wonderful question. It ties back into the original question talking about character. When you are making those decisions, so as some of your audience that are listening may know, each member of Congress is based on population. On the Senate side, it's 2 from each state. But on the House side, as a member of the House on the Congress side for a representative, it's based on population. So the numbers would be this. For every 750,000 people, there's 1 representative. So that means that I am voting or speaking or working on behalf of 750,000 people. And if you think about it from that perspective, like I often have, you really get the crux of the responsibility that it takes to do the right thing. And I think that's if you're looking at it from that perspective, as opposed to just maybe how I feel about something or how somebody else feels about something, what is it that's best? What's the best decision, or how should I vote that helps the most with all those people that I'm representing? And I think that's the challenge at times.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, and being representing the district you're in, that was a huge population,
It is a huge population, and you think about it, there should be responsibility even when you're making decisions for yourself, for your family. But people have trusted you. They have voted for you. Some of them have even supported you financially to go to sometimes a difficult place in Washington, D.C. Our founding fathers were genius because they wanted that friction to exist in Washington, D.C. with different thoughts, different ideologies, different debate that would ultimately produce the best result for the American people. And sometimes I worry that I see sometimes people trying to get more social media hits or trying to get more fame or popularity, as opposed to going up there and understanding the responsibility that the people have trusted this representative, he or she, to accomplish. And I think if you're willing to look at it, it's much more sobering to realize that those people have trusted you to do the right thing. I think that helps you maintain the responsible outlook that you should have.
Yeah, very true. Now, yeah, trustworthiness is a key word, by the way, and we're going to get to that trait in a moment. But first, I want to ask you about fairness. How would you define fairness, and how would you demonstrate this trait? How did you demonstrate this trait, rather, as a congressman?
I think fairness, to me, is giving everybody an equal opportunity to share their perspective. So many times in society, we only want to hear what we agree with or what appeals to us. And I think it's very important. To me, this is kind of leadership 101 when it comes to fairness. I've seen some leaders, Matthew, only surround themselves with people who tell them how great they are.
Right.
To me, the better leader, the more fair leader, is someone that's confident enough in his team or her team that everybody gets to offer their perspective, even when there's disagreement. That makes a team stronger, not weaker, and I think that is the baseline of being fair. Now, as we know, sometimes life isn't fair, And how you respond to that adversity, you have to answer the question. Is it going to make me bitter, or is it going to make me better? Most people at some point will go through some kind of adversity that's simply not fair.
Right.
And I think it's in those moments that you have a choice. Either it can make you angry, make you full of rage, or you can say, you know what, I'm not going to let this make me quit. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. It wasn't just. Sometimes it was even maybe even spiritually ungodly what somebody did to somebody. But how you bounce back from that, even when it's not fair, reveals what we talked about earlier. It really reveals the character of the individual.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts, Carmen?
I really loved what Mark said about everybody's point of view. By having different people's perspectives, that helps you be the most fair, because you're not just thinking, just front and center about yourself, but you're taking everybody into account.
Exactly.
That's an important trait
Carmen,
to have as
Carmen,
somebody that
that's a great
speaks
point.
for multiple people, as a congressman would.
Well, that's a great point. It makes me think about that, because sometimes I've thought I've got the right opinion on something, or I've got all the information, and I'm going to make a decision when somebody in the room may offer, like, well, have you thought about this? And I'm thinking, you know what? I had not thought about that perspective. And it may sometimes I may agree, sometimes I may disagree, but being fair allows everybody, because as I said earlier, I think it makes you stronger as a leader when you operate from much more of a fair approach like that.
Yep, very true. So let's talk about trustworthiness. Now, this has become yet another lost art, especially in our government and in our institutions. Now, you've especially seen this firsthand from some of our press. How do you define and live out trustworthiness? And more importantly, how do you instill it in others?
Well, if you look at the base of trustworthiness, it's basically the ability to be relied on as honest or truthful. And if you look at that as a person, trustworthiness, can that person be relied on as honest or truthful? And I think at the end of the day, and I'm much older than certainly you guys are, but when you look back at your life, what kind of reputation do you have? Do you have one that's been built on a foundation of trustworthiness, or have you been more of a person that operates kind of as someone that your word can't be counted on? When we give our word, like, okay, we're going to set this appointment and we're going to do this radio show, or we're going to meet a friend at this point, can that person count? Can they trust that when you give them your word, whether it's in Congress, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in business? I was at a meeting yesterday, actually 2 days ago, of a company in Greensboro, North Carolina, celebrating its 50th anniversary. And this was something that was said by the founder. For 20 years, they operated a major contract with a major airline simply on a handshake. There was no paperwork, no contract. Think about the trust that it takes to operate something like a multi-million-dollar company just on a handshake. To me, that's the basis of trustworthiness. And again, not to repeat, I think that's directly tied to someone's character. Can someone count on you? When you look somebody in the eye and you give them your word, can you be counted? Can we trust that person will deliver? And I think when we can't trust that, I think it's a huge void of leadership that we may have in that particular instance.
Yep. That's very true. What are your thoughts, Carmen?
Trust is really important in this world.
Yes.
If we don't have trust, what can we really lean on? We just walk blindly. At least I try to trust.
Yeah. Now, my thoughts are, as Ronald Reagan would say, trust but verify. Those are his words too.
Yes. Trust but verify, especially when you're looking at whether it's politics, whether it's business. You want to trust, you want to build relationships. When you're dealing with foreign adversaries, yes, if somebody gives you your word, but use the wisdom. Now, I think it's a little different for relationships. If you, and I just officiated a wedding Saturday a week ago. if you want to have, to me, the most healthy relationship you can have, it's a blind faith. It's a trust without holding anything back, that you're going to care and protect and love that person without any reservation. And I think that's the essence of a healthy relationship, is the trustworthiness, that no matter what situation, you have total trust in that person. In life, I have seen those to be the most healthy relationships.
Yep, very true. So the last two traits I'm going to talk about today are citizenship and empathy. Now, my question for you about citizenship is, as a former congressman and a candidate for governor, what do you think it means to be a good citizen?
Well, I think the first thing is following the laws of the country, doing what is right. I think that's very crucial. That in fact, even as a member of Congress, you raise your hand and you take an oath, and to the Constitution, that you will protect and serve, and do everything you can to make sure the Constitution is never broken. And I think that's so important when it comes to making sure that we are standing on a solid foundation. I think sometimes we come up short on that, but I think it's very important that we surround ourselves with people who live out that perspective, or healthy perspective in life. Look, here's the thing: whether you're a doctor, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a congressman, whether you are a carpenter, whatever it is, I think the most important thing in all that is just being faithful to what you feel like God has called you to do. And I think that's a huge essence in when it comes to revealing the ultimate character.
Yep, very true. So, and my last question I'm going to ask you is about empathy. Now, how do you believe people across this state and this country should demonstrate empathy? And in your case, how do you demonstrate it? And how did you demonstrate it, rather, in your position as a congressman?
Well, that's a great question, because we can rush through life sometimes so quick, consumed with I don't know about you guys, but I'm a list maker. I like to put things on paper, and sometimes I can be so focused on getting my daily task or list done that I don't show empathy to the people around me. As a person of faith and a former pastor and a Christian, I believe that sometimes God intersects your life with people that you're supposed to engage, people you're supposed to invest, sometimes just a word of encouragement. And I think a bad habit sometimes I have found myself falling into is just rushing through and not having the empathy. The empathy is basically the ability to understand and share the feeling of others. And that's a discipline that I think you learn, because sometimes we can be so selfish and so absorbed with everything that's going on around us that we forget to remember or think about, look, there are other people who have big issues or are going through a struggle or a troublesome time, that we could be such a blessing to those folks, that we could offer a word of encouragement, buy them a cup of coffee, just little things that may find. To me, I think that's the essence of empathy, is just getting outside of yourself sometimes and looking how you can minister or be a blessing to someone else.
Truer words could never have been spoken, right, Carmen?
I agree.
Now, before we close, please share with us some thoughts on how we can bring character back into our culture.
Well, we certainly need to be focused on that. I think what comes to mind, Matthew, is that doing the right thing even when we are pressured to kind of follow the crowd, whatever fad or whatever it might be, can you, even when you may get criticized, that you're willing to stand up and speak truth to power? Because it's so much easier just to go with the flow of what everybody else thinks, what everybody else says. But here's the test. Here's the test on this. And this is to me the difference between leaders and followers. Can you do that in a way where people see you as a leader and not someone that's just condemning them for their perspective? That's the challenge. All of us have opinions, right?
Right.
All of us have different ideas about things. To me, the leaders that I admire the most is someone that may have a different point of view, but going back to what you just talked about, but has the empathy or the care to not only to listen to my perspective, but is willing not to just to win the argument, but to try and make a difference. That's the challenge that I think that ultimately shows a good leader, somebody full of character and empathy. And I think I answer it this way. And I think this is a good question I used to ask my staff. Are we making an argument or are we making a difference? To me, that's the true test.
True indeed. All right, Mark Walker, former congressman, former pastor, and a current candidate for governor of North Carolina. Mark, thanks for joining us. It was an honor.
Matthew, Carmen, yes, absolutely. It was our privilege to be with you guys. Great job. We look forward to coming back sometime in the future.
All right, thanks. Character in Action is a co-production of Firebird Media and the 7 Degrees of Change Foundation. Your host is me, Matthew J. Norcross. Our producer is Robby Dilmore, who also does the intro. Filling in this week is Carmen Ramirez. Special thanks to the Truth Network. If you like the show, please listen to and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes are posted every Sunday. Thank you for listening. And always remember, everyone can be a phoenix.